Welcome to Tech TV Live. We're covering the technology stories that really matter, and today we're covering the M&S hack. My name's Bill Mew, and hopefully I'll be helping to bring a lively debate here today. Helping me do this is our main reporter on this particular topic, Pete Warren, and Pete is going to be joined by our main guest, Graeme Stewart, who will be leading us through some of the information here. Pete, Graeme, over to you.
Graeme, it's just a hack, isn't it? I mean, on the high street, we see these all of the time. We've seen so many of these, and they're just these anonymous people, aren't they? This is Scattered Spider. They've all got these wonderful names. Who are the people behind this?
So, Pete, the way to think about this is there are broadly four different types of gangs. Okay. Or four different types of attackers. So at the bottom end, you've got the kind of oft-used trope, the kind of teenager in a hoodie that is sort of, hobbyist, effectively. At the top end of the scale, you've got nation-state actors. So you've got the usual Iran, North Korea, Russia type thing. The next one down from that are the more mercenary groups that tend to be used by nation-state actors to basically do their work for them. So there's a level of plausible deniability. These people that have gone after the retailers recently sit in a third group, which is strictly in it for the money. And in terms of the way to think of this, these are the guys that they're like old school bank heist. Okay, so what they're in it is strictly for the money. So 30 years ago, these are big guys with balaclavas and shotguns taking down, going after the local bank. They are looking for an organization where they can extract some data and extort the organization, and this sits squarely in that space. So and there's lots of these. I mean, we would estimate at Checkpoint there's probably over 650 of these gangs operating in the world at any one time. They're geographically disparate in terms of the organization. So there was a claim, Dragonforce made a claim earlier on this week, or by inference, they sent out a press release saying, actually, if anyone retaliates and goes after organizations in the CIS, so the former Soviet Union, so Russia, will look down and strike back with sort of mighty vengeance. That's a massive red herring. This is a geographically disparate organization. The way I always think of it, they're a bit like a jazz band. You've got like your core people and then people dropping in and out and joining. And this is the reality of every day now in terms of cyber. These gangs are very well funded. Dragonforce are an interesting business model, and maybe we can look at that in a bit of detail if you like. But this is a business, and these are the modern day equivalents of the guys knocking off the bank.
And so these are straight criminals. Do they have any activities in other criminal areas? Do they have any crossovers?
This is what they do. This is their MO, and this is what they're after. I mean, and that's why I tend to separate them into different groupings. So this isn't politically motivated, despite the kind of press release, which like I said, I broadly discount. These are in it for the money, in it for themselves. There's no small amount of machismo attached to this as well. There's quite a lot of that going on here, and make a big point of it's like sort of guys tagging when they do graffiti and things like that. There's a large amount of machismo in there. There's bragging rights attached to these kind of things, but this is their sole purpose for existence.
Okay, and Ross Brewer, Graylog. What's the impact of this? What has M&S actually suffered?
Well, in terms of just generally speaking, as Graeme said, we see this every day, and we see this hundreds of times a day, global phenomena. The reality is that it's impacting. It's the operational outage, so that impacts revenue direct to the bottom line. Then there's the reputational risk. We see shareholders sort of leaving these businesses. So this table stakes have got really high, and organizations, especially in retail, where they're traditionally focused on footfall and lowest cost widget. Okay, that's their bread and butter. That's where they come from. And now they're actually an online business, and some of them are even online banks. So the table stakes have changed, the threats changed. This is massively disruptive to those organizations. And sadly, this is what one of these organizations might think of as a black swan event. Like, this has just happened to them. It's the worst thing in 5 years from an IT perspective. So, what could we do? It's happening to everyone. Well, imagine as this increases in veracity and frequency with the help of AI, that these black swan events won't be every year, they'll be every month, every day, every hour, every second. So how are these organizations going to deal with that when they can't even deal with the black swan that's a one a year? So we've really got a fundamental shift in thought in terms of how we approach these problems going forward.
I mean, this has cost, according to the Bank of America, it's costing M&S 43 million a year. And as you say, this is happening to so many other organizations. We're actually seeing a spate of things that are being described as hacking at the moment. And a lot of companies don't seem to have any protection at all, do they?
Well, I think that the challenge for most organizations is that they have a complex IT environment. IT environments inherently have vulnerabilities, but the reality is that not enough's being done within these organizations to monitor for this kind of behavior and effectively stop these attacks in their embryonic. Some of these attacks go over weeks and months and years. So you've got to be looking for the telltale signs, the digital footprints of the activity, and then stopping them as quickly as you can, but also making sure that you realize that you're not going to stop them. There will be incidents. So you need to make sure that you've got an incident plan, it's well rehearsed, and more importantly, you've got the forensic data on standby, knowing that these things are going to happen. So when the invariably Black Monday happens, you can actually get in there and find it and actually work out systems that are impacted, user profiles that are impacted, so you can remediate and get back up and running. So it's actually getting back up and running quickly is becoming more important than the actual incident itself. And this is where forensics play a big part in coming back online as quickly as possible.
Professor Maheshwari from Salford University, as Ross has said, brand is going to be a big issue here, isn't it? There must be an impact on M&S from this.
Yeah, as we know, brand trust and brand loyalty is quite difficult to build. It takes years of work from a retailer or any organization to build a strong group of loyal customers. M&S does have one. Definitely more than the remuneration or the income or the impact on economics, there's a bigger impact on brand trust. Now, how M&S communicates to their customers, that's external, but also to their internal stakeholders from an employer brand perspective as well, because quite clearly there are 65,000 plus employees who are dealing this on a face value every day in and out at the moment, speaking to the customers, trying to explain to them. So that is a bigger issue for M&S at the moment to deal with. However, coming out with a transparency and honesty in terms of where they are, what they are doing, what steps they've been taking, I think that will help the organizations like M&S to ensure the impact, the negative impact on brand trust is not as massive or as big as other organizations might face. M&S also has a strong loyalty from customers, who've been there for decades now. And I think supporting those customers to understand how an organization like M&S has suffered through this certainly will help them. But equally, I believe the communication package, to explain to all of their stakeholders, I think that will be key at this stage to ensure as minimum impact on their brand trust.
But we've been talking to some M&S customers. They don't seem to be particularly happy with the amount of communication that they've been getting. They see it as rather opaque. I mean, one of the quotes that we got from them was, "This is a classic fail by M&S." How's that going to affect them?
Yeah, and this is key, how they deal with this kind of scenarios. So they've been quite clear in terms of what sort of issues they're dealing with, whether it is to do with online shopping or customers' accounts, whether it is to do with sparks, reactivation of those accounts. I think key is to making sure how they're communicating effectively. Maybe it is on a daily basis. At the moment, you can see the comms is coming out, but on a very staggered basis. And I think that's where M&S, probably their communication team, needs to be really active in ensuring if it is the basics of even just an email or even speaking out even in the stores to your customers. I think that will help, because a lot of customers are not tech savvy for M&S at the moment. So you got to be really communicating with all sorts of channels of engagement to your customers to ensure that where there are gaps of understanding within a customer base, they are covered.
But this is an issue, isn't it? Because you think about M&S. I mean, this is why this is a little bit different, because M&S, as you say, it's a middle-aged, middle class. It has this reputation of being, oh, you can trust M&S. It's where you go to for your underwear. It's not a good look, is it? So this is this trusted organization, and you can't trust them with your data.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to how much resilient are they in ensuring that they how they're dealing with this with all sorts of stakeholders at the moment. It will be always difficult on this side of an organization when they know there are a lot of issues that they need to really patch up, whether it's to do with the technology, whether it's to do with their infrastructure and digital technology, or whatever it is. However, the basic for them will be, or the focus for them will be, to ensure that the minimal impact on their consumer base. Now, how they do with it is to ensure the rebuilding of their brand, rebuilding of the loyal customers, whether it is to do with incentivizing those customers at a certain stage. All those things should be planned right now. They can't wait for this issue to be resolved and then start thinking about what do we do next. I think that sort of planning should be already happening in the back house somewhere.
Dion, you're heavily involved in Dion Rooney of Rimini. You're heavily involved in this sort of online marketplace, this online area. You've got considerable experience in it. What do you think about this? Do you think that this cyber incident has damaged is a brand damager?
It is absolutely a brand damager, and Vish said it very well. Part of it is the issue itself that occurred, but a big piece of this is their reaction to the incident, their communication to their customers, stepping them through what they need to do to protect themselves and their ecosystem, and with a mixed audience, they need to be very thoughtful about how they address it. And unfortunately, you get into situations where they're trying not to say too much, and unfortunately, that leaves customers feeling like they're not being given the full story or the truth.
Graeme, this is it's the equivalent really of having a smashed window on the high street, isn't it? This is what these people are doing. This is what these gangs are doing. It's a very wild west world. Do you think we should be taking this a lot more seriously? Do you think businesses should be taking these incidents from these gangs a lot more seriously?
So I would say from my part and my experience in this space that they do. I think there's a number of things in play here, and it actually plays back into the brand value piece. I think that, and one of the things that M&S has in its favour is a long-standing relationship with its customers and a long-standing relationship culturally. I actually think M&S will recover from this quite easily. I mean, what's interesting is that this is not, and that's a relatively easy. Let me qualify that statement. I think that. Part of the bit that sits there is that 99% of people don't actually understand what's gone on here, and that actually plays to M&S's favour. And I've done quite a few pieces this week, kind of explain to people what the net output of this is likely to be for them as a consumer, as a customer. So one of the pieces you see in these kind of attacks, and let's be honest, this is an entirely typical type of attack. There's nothing unusual about this. It's depressingly familiar, where you have a break into a system, and in this case, it wasn't actually, it appears, a technology failure. It was a process failure. Exfiltration of data, so removal of data, and then the next stage on is the ransomware, the encryption of systems. The exfiltration of data typically leads to what we would describe as a secondary attack, and we've all had it. Okay, we've all had a text message claiming to be from the post office, claiming that our parcel's been held up, and actually there's a problem, and could you please click here and do this and do that, and sometimes you go, yeah, it's going to cost you an additional £10 to get your data, get your parcel delivered. So those secondary attacks use the data from the primary attack, but most people, 99% of people, just see that as a thing of everyday life because everybody gets them. And so I think unless there is a significant uptick in what's happened, and it's not just M&S, it's the other retailers as well, in the damage that's been done, and that comes out. And if you take the other attack that happened, the co-op attack, it sounds like someone in old school terms ripped the cable out of the wall when they realized what was going on and actually stopped the ransomware attack. I actually don't think the long-standing brand damage on this is very high. I think once they get past this and once they move on, the cultural attachment of the UK to M&S, to Co-op, to the other one was Harrods as well. Harrods is obviously an interesting case in point in terms of its cultural attachment. But I actually think that they'll get past this pretty quickly, and people will forget about it pretty quickly. The issue as Ross was talking about is the frequency of these attacks, and what you've this phenomena that we've explored ourselves in the past is this idea of breach fatigue. Which is frankly, people get these text messages the whole time. They hear about hacks the whole time. They go, doesn't bother me, doesn't affect my daily life. I'm clearly not going to respond to. There was one going around last week, which I was asked to comment on, offering M&S, and it was obviously a nefarious thing. It wasn't from M&S, offering M&S customers free tea. We're really sorry. Here, click on this link, and we're going to give you some free tea. Now, obviously, as a nation of tea drinkers, we're going to respond positively to that, and you're going to get clicks on it. That's a secondary attack. But I just think that the very careful to separate the attack itself and the damage to the organization, and you've kind of highlighted, there's a financial damage to this, both in terms of share price and both in terms of the revenue. Anybody that stopped it in M&S in the last week or so will notice that the brands the shelves are pretty bare, and the same with the co-op. So there's a revenue problem with this, but I think the brand will recover well. The problem we've got here is attacks on retailers is going through the roof. So retail used to be like the 10th, 12th most attacked sector within the UK economy, and it's gone up to 5th in the last couple of months. And those figures based on checkpoint data that from our monitoring. So I don't think the brand value is long-standing. I think the issue here is these attacks are going to continue and going to get worse. And the question is how much breach fatigue. You see another attack on the news and you just go, yep, there's another one. Does it affect me directly in my everyday life? No. So I'm just going to get on with it in my life, and it's not going to make a huge difference. So I don't think it's long-standing is my message.
Ross, this epidemic that Graham's talking about, do we just have to put up with it? What are the police doing? Do we need more cyber cops on the online street?
Well, I think I was thinking about referring to it as a cyberdemic, because I think that's what we're in the middle of, and I think we've got to really look at this seriously because it's now having a profound impact. And just expanding on what Graeme just said there, yes, at this point in time, the executives can go to the board and say, well, look, we got caught out. We got caught a little bit short. It's okay. We've put these protective measures in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. We are in a very different economy. And so retailers and every business is really working on fine margins, and any disruption can then call into question other decisions. So I actually sort of would say a little bit differently to Graeme, in as much that there is a long tail on these things. And we have seen big retailers in the US that what happened was the cybersecurity incident just started to get shareholders and key stakeholders questioning the executives' decision-making processes and their professionalism. And then later on, you found that other things got called into question. And you go back 6 months later and the chief executive officer's gone, the chief information officer's gone, the chief information security officer's gone. So all of these executives on, tens of millions of dollars all lost their roles as a result of a cyber incident. That was the start of it, but it just started to call into questions other things about that management team. So I think executives have to be really careful about this because it does have a long tail and it's got a sting in that tail that can bite them in the end. And so as far as what we have to do as an industry and law enforcement, yes, law enforcement's all across this. There's some claim that 50% of the people on the dark web are actually law enforcement officers. So you think you're speaking to a criminal, you're actually speaking to a cop. So yeah, and just to think these groups don't know that they think that the authorities don't know who they are and where they are. Of course they do. They know where, they've got that side of it covered. It's just a question of how to get to them and when. But I think as a world, we have to treat this like terrorism and actually take a totally different approach. We can't just leave it down to the companies to solve this problem. We can't leave it to the individual country certs to solve this problem. We need to really invoke, there's been some question about kinetic responses, drop bombs on people that are doing this. That's not going to work because of attribution. These people are all over the world, even though they could be from a country. What we need to do is start penalizing them. Say, for instance, that area of Myanmar, where all the scam warehouses are, we cut their internet off. We cut the internet off for the country. Tell you what, you cut the internet off for a country, you will have riots in the street and you'll see hackers ejected out of those buildings as quick as lightning. And I think that's the kind of crazy, I know that's a crazy concept, but that's how serious this needs to get to stop this, because organized crime is in this in a big way. And there are other impacts to that. So the money laundering, there's, child exploitation, all of these things are now becoming interrelated and interconnected. So this isn't a sort of a sort of a basic sort of soft financial crime with no, personal consequences. It's bigger than that.
Vish, as Ross has just said, there's an impact on the board. One of the things that we're seeing with legislation that's coming down the line is that increasingly people on the board are being expected to have some technological familiarity. Do you think that that's something that they can actually boast about in a brand sense, that they can say, hey, we've got people on our board who are completely wired?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this connects to a softer piece of consumer psychology here. So the consumer psychology, if you look at that way, it also affects positively or negatively the trust being built in the brand. So if your consumers and customers are looking at the company, the organization, and even the people at the high top thinking that they all are fully aware of all sorts of scenarios, whether it is to be technological development or the issues like cyber attacks, it certainly gives you that kind of a satisfaction as a consumer, thinking I'm in the right hands, my data is in the right hands, I am dealing with the correct organization where everybody is fully aware. I think in this case, particularly in M&S, if you see, whether we say there was a backup plan or not, I think the key case was that employees were not ready for this. They were not trained enough to deal with this. Now, whether it was the top board or whether it was the middle level managers or the shop floor managers, they were just not prepared. I think that the biggest lesson they would learn from this, and I hope they do, because of the strength in the brand, is to ensure that the full awareness is there, the kind of understanding of what impact it could create on a brand. They do come out of this one as well. And I think how that plays into the consumer psychology will also kind of relate to its kind of rebuilding stage as well. At the moment, if you see, the data says to us about 7 to 9% only brand trust has been lost for M&S currently. So, and that's not massive, as Graeme was saying earlier, this will take, a short period for them to rebuild. But how they do it now, both internally and externally, that will play on emotions, that will play on symbolism, that will play on cognitive thinking of those consumers. And that will, whether it will continue to build that strong psychology for your consumers to come back to you, or whether it will completely diminish and thinking, well, I have lost trust in you as an organization. That's key for M&S to go ahead now.
Dion, so what is that forward-looking piece then? What should they be doing? What should the world look like? Because online is where we are going to be in the future, isn't it? Everybody's buying online now.
Yeah, and I think retailers in particular, but many companies fall into a compliance mindset. And I always spoke to my team about security first, compliance will follow. Because if we're waiting for rules and guidance and regulation, the bad actors are moving much quicker than that will help. And I think it does leave some companies and challenged in where they focus. And security should be the focus. Compliant will come along for the ride. But I also think companies need to be more vigilant about a multi-layered approach of protection. It used to be important to lock all the doors of your organization and you thought you were protected. You now have to assume people are going to get in, and you need multiple layers of protection. And many companies that have been breached, their backups were the first thing to go, right? So how do you create an environment where you have either a vapor lock or some sort of a time-phased backup where you can dial the clock back? Those technologies exist. And then proactive, intrusion prevention and detection, things like, we have a product for VM that, has a component in there that would have shut down the encryption before it occurred. And my point is, you need all those layers. You can't have one line of defense and hope that you're going to be protected. And on the social engineering side, and Vish is right, we need greater awareness, but we also need to test those individuals. We need to simulate, bad actors trying to socially engineer. We used to call the help desk regularly to see if we could get them to give up credentials, and it was a coaching moment for those folks. So again, I think it's got to be a much more comprehensive program, and investment is a question. And we talked about retailers running on thin margin. How do they reduce the run portion of their budget and move some of those dollars to categories that are going to be more beneficial for the organization? Because keeping the lights on is just not enough anymore.
Do you think that they should make a virtue of this? That they should put out adverts saying, hey, we've really invested a lot in cyber? Because that's been one of the issues for a long time. A lot of people in cyber have complained that they're the people who don't get the money. They don't get the budget to deal with this because they're seen as an overhead. They're not seen as an essential.
Yeah, and I think in part, in my history, we looked at risks in two dimensions. Its likeliness to occur and the severity of if it does occur. And a good security program can highlight the risks that people need to invest in to mitigate or remediate. And I think it is in part the job of the organization to, one, collectively view security as their responsibility. It is not IT's job. It is not the CISO's job. It is the organization's job. And I think they need to make a case for investments are necessary or get the appropriate alignment with the board that we talked about, the executive committee, on the risks we are willing to accept, because some do make sense, right? It's low likelihood to occur. It's a low impact risk. So you can't fund all of them, but alignment within the organization is critically important on how you invest. And there are creative ways to reduce that run portion and move those dollars into more important categories of IT spend.
I mean, it's interesting. About 15 years ago, I spoke to somebody who was involved in cyber, and they were doing a lot of very sensitive cyber operations for the UK government. And I'd said to them, why don't we go out and identify these people? And they turned around to me and said, oh, no, you've got to be very careful of these people. They break your legs. They literally said that to me. And do you think that there is that sort of fear thing that if somebody does say, hey, we're very good at cyber, that they make themselves a target?
Absolutely. You heard the comment, about bravado and the I can do anything mentality of some of these organizations, and you are somewhat putting a target on your back when you kind of dare them, if you will, to penetrate or to impact your organization.
Is that the case, Graeme? Is that?
Yeah, again, that's, and I've used the analogy already, but I'm going to stick with it because it's a really good one here. It would be like the bank standing up and saying our vaults are heist proof. It's just a daft thing to say. You're encouraging people to come and have a go, and that's one of the interesting things about this, of course, is one of the comments earlier on was talking about this kind of sort of judicial element of this, following this up. The difficulty lies in the disparate nature of these organizations. They're geographically spread. So there were reports in the last month or so that there were members of the Dragon Force group, had been arrested. There was a Scottish chap that was arrested. There was a guy arrested in Florida. These people are spread all over, and the difficulty in lies in following up with these people is that you're talking about a multi-jurisdiction action, and Interpol operating don't operate at a speed anything like the speed that these groups move at. So putting your head above the parapet and saying we're completely cyber attack proof is as daft as saying that your vault is heist proof. And similarly, realizing that actually it's going to be very hard to prosecute these people in both the literal and actual sense of this. It's going to be very hard to do that.
So does that mean then, Ross, that we just have to tolerate this situation? That everybody has to just essentially say, I'm cyber aware now. I have to make myself as safe as I possibly can, and that's the best that I can do in the current situation. Maybe encrypt my data, make sure, as Dion's been saying, just make sure that I can minimize the damage.
No, not at all. It's really well documented now by the MITRE organization in terms of the tools, techniques, and procedures, the TTPs as we call them, that these hacking groups are using. There's a lot of information around how they actually get in and how they propagate around the organization, how they exfiltrate data and so forth. So the reality is that we're dealing with a digital hygiene problem. This isn't nation state, North Korea, the best in the world that are going at these retailers. This is basic vulnerabilities, basic impacting an employee, getting the social engineering an employee, getting them to give up their ID and then going in with that ID. So these are things from a monitoring and analytics standpoint that have been around. I've been in monitoring, analytics, and forensics for the past 3 decades, and nothing's changed in the space in as much that you need to make sure that the controls that you've deployed are effectively configured and working properly. Too much time spent buying this tech and not enough time spent testing this tech and making sure it works. And then there's just been some fundamental maturity problems. So for instance, if you take the logging and monitoring space, that Graylog works in, it's sort of taken us 30 years to sort of come to the conclusion, actually, we need to stop charging customers for all their data, because then they're making decisions about, can I afford to collect this forensic data? Can I afford to collect these systems? And I'm making these trade-offs all the time. So it's only now that we've reached this point where, from a licensing standpoint, we now say to organizations, no, we'll let you collect everything. We'll process it all for you, but you will only charge you for what you're using and what you need and what you see value in. So we're just that change has just happened in the last few months, the last year or so. And I think that's going to help organizations do a lot better job around preparing for their incident response, preparing for their forensics, and do better, more effective monitoring and analytics, and applying AI and so forth to that analysis as well. So we are about to make a step change in the industry that's going to help the client base, and hopefully they'll do a lot better in these situations by first averting them in the first place, but certainly cleaning up afterwards.
Vish, is cyber something that you teach on your marketing courses at Salford? Does cyber raise its head very much?
Yes, surely this is now becoming one of the newest development in the curriculum planning as much as other things. Going back to the point of do we shout about it? Our preparation, our strength. Again, I fully agree. We don't have to shout about it. However, having cyber as one of your top risks in an organization certainly will help in the first place, because then clearly, your focus is on there to ensure that we are prepared as an organization, whether it is to do with a retail sector or any other sector. In higher education sector, we deal with a lot of data, for example, student data, staff data, and every other thing that we do with. And cyber becomes one of the top risks for the institution. Even the students who are coming now, and they will be the future graduates, they will be benefiting from this kind of operation in the classroom as well, to get them prepared for the practical world outside. But having a cyber as the top risk and making sure that your stakeholders internally are fully aware of how you're preparing that certainly will help to rebuild trust and ensure that customer has that assurance of that data being dealt in the appropriate manner. I think that will massively help in ensuring the brand value is not lost. So both, yeah, from a perspective of yes, of course, they're looking at the practical world for the next generation. Certainly, the university is always preparing for that. But equally, going from the traditional mode of actual consumer assurance, these things will certainly help to have cyber as your top risk, because clearly this is the world we are living in now.
And Dion, I'll give you the last word. Obviously, the word AI has reared its ugly head. I mean, it rears its ugly head in my inbox every other email, in fact. But in this AI world, data is going to be all important, isn't it? So confronting that for an online operation has got to be a big issue.
Yeah, certainly, in retail in particular, there is vast amount of data and transactions that need to be protected. But yes, people are going to look for and continue to look for more strategic ways to leverage AI, which requires, a comprehensive organizational data, because, a lot of software companies are coming out with products that have AI in it, but the real benefit, in my opinion, on AI is, looking across your entire organization and leveraging that data set, which means some organizations are going to pull together a data lake or some sort of an environment that's going to be a target for bad actors like these. And retailers need to find ways to have that multi-layered approach to protect it for sure.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much.
Thank
And
you.
a very big thank you to all of our panel and to Pete. Obviously, a very big issue here, and one that I'm sure that we're going to be returning to. After all, this wasn't just any brand disaster. This was a M&S brand disaster, and it's one that I think will carry on in the news for a while yet, and we'll be revisiting us soon. We'd also invite you to return to Tech TV to come and have a look at all the other many major issues that we're going to be covering in the near future. Thank you again to our panelists and to Pete, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.